Anne Frank, middle of page 229. Thursday, March 23rd, 1944. Dearest Kitty. Things are more or less back to normal here. Our coupon men have been released from prison, thank goodness. Meeb's been back since yesterday, but today it was her husband's turn to take to his bed. Chills and fever, the usual flu symptoms. Bub is better, though she still has a cough, and Mr. Kleinman will have to stay home for a long time. Yesterday, a plane crashed nearby. The crew was able to parachute out in time. It crashed on top of a school, but luckily there were no children inside. There was a small fire and a couple of people were killed. As the airmen made their descent, the Germans sprayed them with bullets. The Amsterdammers who saw it seethed with rage at such a dastardly deed. We, by which I mean the ladies, were also scared out of our wits. Brr, I hate the sound of gunfire. Now about myself. I was with Peter yesterday, and somehow, I honestly don't know how, we wound up talking about sex. I'd made up my mind a long time ago to ask him a few things. He knows everything. When I said that Margot and I weren't very well informed, he was amazed. I told him a lot about Margot, me, and mother and father, and said that lately I didn't dare ask them anything. He offered to enlighten me, and I gratefully accepted. He described how contraceptives work, and I asked him very boldly how boys could tell they were grown up. He had to think about that one. He said he'd tell me tonight. I told him what had happened to Jacques and said that girls are defenseless against strong boys. Well, you don't have to be afraid of me, he said. When I came back that evening, he told me how it is with boys. Slightly embarrassing, but still awfully nice to be able to discuss it with him. Neither he nor I had ever imagined we'd be able to talk so openly to a girl or a boy, respectively, about such intimate matters. I think I know everything now. He told me a lot about what he called Professionmen in German. The night in the bathroom, Margot and I were talking about Bram and trees, two friends of hers. This morning I was in for a nasty surprise. After breakfast, Peter beckoned me upstairs. That was a dirty trick you played on me, he said. I heard that you and Margot were staying in the bathroom last night. I think you just wanted to find out how much Peter knew, and then have a good laugh. I was stunned. I did everything I could to talk him out of that outrageous idea. I could understand how he must have felt, but it just wasn't true. Oh, no, Peter, I said. I'd never be so mean. I told you I wouldn't pass on anything you said to me, and I won't. To put on an act like that and then deliberately be so mean? No, Peter, that's not my idea of a joke. It wouldn't be fair. I didn't say anything honest. Don't you believe me? He assured me he did, but I think we'll have to talk about it again sometime. I've done nothing all day but worry about it. Thank goodness he came right out and said what was on his mind. Imagine if he'd gone around thinking I could be that mean. He's so sweet. Now I'll have to tell him everything. Yours, Anne. Friday, March 24th, 1944. Dear Kitty, I often go up to Peter's room after dinner nowadays to breathe in the fresh evening air. You get around to meaningful conversations more quickly in the dark than with the sun tickling your face. It's cozy and snug, sitting beside him on a chair and looking outside. The Van Dans and Dussel make the silliest remarks when I disappear into the room. Ans wait, Hammett, they say, or is it proper for a gentleman to receive young girls in his room at night with the lights out? Peter has amazing presence of mind. In the face of these so-called witticisms, my mother incidentally is also bursting with curiosity and simply dying to ask what we talk about, only she's secretly afraid I would refuse to answer. Peter says the grown-ups are just jealous because we're young and that we shouldn't take their obnoxious comments to heart. Sometimes he comes downstairs to me, but that's awkward too, because in spite of all his precautions, his face turns bright red and he can hardly get the words out of his mouth. I'm glad I don't blush. It must be extremely unpleasant. Besides, it bothers me that Margot has to sit downstairs all by herself while I'm upstairs enjoying Peter's company. But what can I do about it? I wouldn't mind if she came, but she'd just be the odd one out, sitting there like a lump on a log. I've had to listen to countless remarks about our sudden friendship. I can't tell you how often the conversation at meals has been about an annex wedding. Should the war last another 5 years? Do we take any notice of this parental chit-chat? Hardly, since it's all so silly. Have my parents forgotten that they were young once? Apparently they have. At any rate, they laugh at us when we're serious, and they're serious when we're joking. I don't know what's going to happen next, or whether we'll run out of things to say, but if it goes on like this, we'll eventually be able to be together without talking. If only his parents would stop acting so strangely. It's probably because they don't like seeing me so often. Peter and I certainly never tell them what we talk about. Imagine if they knew we were discussing such intimate things. I'd like to ask Peter whether he knows what girls look like down there. I don't think boys are as complicated as girls. You can easily see what boys look like in photographs or pictures of male nudes. But with women, it's different. In women, the genitals, or whatever they're called, are hidden between their legs. Peter has probably never seen a girl up close. To tell you the truth, neither have I. Boys are a lot easier. How on earth would I go about describing a girl's parts? I can tell from what he said that he doesn't know exactly how it all fits together. He was talking about the Muttermund, but that's on the inside, where you can't see it. Everything's pretty well arranged in us women. Until I was 11 or 12, I didn't realize there was a second set of labia on the inside, since you couldn't see them. What's even funnier is that I thought urine came out of the clitoris. I asked Mother one time what that little bump was, and she said she didn't know. She can really play dumb when she wants to. But to get back to the subject, how on earth can you explain what it all looks like without any models? Shall I try it anyway? Okay, here goes. When you're standing up, all you see from the front is hair. Between your legs, there are two soft, cushiony things, also covered with hair, which press together when you're standing, so you can't see what's inside. They separate when you sit down, and they're very red and quite fleshy on the inside. In the upper part, between the outer labia, there's a fold of skin that, on the second thought, looks like a kind of blister. That's the clitoris. Then come the inner labia, which are also pressed together in a kind of crease. When they open up, you can see a fleshy little mound, no bigger than the top of my thumb. The upper part has a couple of small holes in it, which is where the urine comes out. The lower part looks as if it were skin, and yet that's where the vagina is. You can't barely find it because the folds of skin hide the opening. The hole's so small I can hardly imagine how a man could get in there, much less how a baby could come out. It's hard enough trying to get your index finger inside. That's all there is, and yet it plays such an important role. Yours, Anne M. Frank. Saturday, March 25th, 1944. Dearest Kitty, you never realize how much you've changed until after it's happened. I've changed quite drastically, and everything about me is different. My opinions, ideas, critical outlook, inwardly, outwardly, nothing's the same. And I might safely add, since it's true, I've changed for the better. I once told you that, after years of being adored, it was hard for me to adjust to the harsh reality of the grown-ups and rebukes. But Father and Mother are largely to blame for my having to put up with so much. At home, they wanted me to enjoy life, which was fine, but here they shouldn't have encouraged me to agree with them and only shown me their side of all the quarrels and gossip. It was a long time before I discovered the score was 50-50. I now know that many blunders have been committed here by young and old alike. Father and Mother's biggest mistake in dealing with the Van Dams is that they're never candid and friendly. Admittedly, the friendliness might have to be feigned. Above all, I want to keep the peace and to neither quarrel nor gossip. With Father and Margot, that's not difficult, but it is with Mother, which is why I'm glad she gives me an occasional rap on the knuckles. You can win Mr. Van Dam to your side by agreeing with him, listening quietly, not saying much, and most of all, responding to his teasing and his corny jokes with a joke of your own. Mr. Van Dam can be won over by talking openly to her and adamantly when you're wrong. She also frankly admits her faults, of which she has many. I know all too well that she doesn't think as badly of me as she did in the beginning, and that's simply because I'm honest and tell people right to their faces what I think, even when I'm not very flattering. I want to be honest. I think it gets you further and also makes you feel better about yourself. Yesterday, Mr. Van D was talking about the rice we gave Mr. Kleinman. All we do is give, but at a certain point, I think that enough is enough. If he'd only take the trouble, Mr. Kleinman could scrounge up his own rice. Why shouldn't we give away all our supplies? We need them just as badly. No, Miss Van D, I replied, I don't agree with you. Mr. Kleinman may very well be able to get a hold of a little rice, but he doesn't like having to worry about it. It's not our place to criticize the people who are helping us. We shouldn't give them whatever they need if we can possibly spare it. One less plate of rice a week won't make that much difference. We can always eat beans. Miss Van D didn't see it my way, but she added that even though she disagreed, she was willing to back down, and that was an entirely different matter. Well, I've said enough. Sometimes I know what my place is, and sometimes I have my doubts, but I'll eventually get where I want to be. I know I will, especially now that I have to have help, since Peter helps me through many a rough patch and rainy day. I honestly don't know how much he loves me and whether we'll ever get as far as a kiss. In any case, I don't want to force the issue. I told Father I often go see Peter and ask if he approved, and of course, he did. It's much easier to tell Peter things I'd normally keep to myself. For example, I told him I want to write later on, and if I can't be a writer, to write in addition to my work. I don't have much in the way of money or worldly possessions. I'm not beautiful, intelligent, or clever, but I'm happy, and I intend to stay that way. I was born happy. I love people. I love a trusting nature, and I'd like everyone else to be happy too. Your devoted friend, Anna Frank. An empty day, though clear and bright, is just as dark as any day. I wrote this a few weeks ago, and it no longer holds true, but I included it because my poems are so few and far between. Monday, March 27, 1944, Dearest Kitty. At least one long chapter of on our life in hiding should be about politics, but I've been avoiding the subject since it interests me so little. Today, however, I'll devote an entire letter to politics. Of course, there are many different opinions on this topic, and it's not surprising to hear it frequently discussed in times of war, but arguing so much about politics is just plain stupid. Let them laugh, swear, make bets, grumble, or do whatever they want to, as long as they stew in their own juice. But don't let them argue, since that only makes things worse. The people who come from outside bring us a lot of news that later proves to be untrue. However, up to now, our radio has never lied. Jan Meep, Mr. Kleinman Bepp, and Mr. Kruger go up and down in their political moods, though Jan least of all. Here in the annex, the mood never varies. The endless debates over the invasion, air raid, speeches, etc., are accompanied by countless explanations such as impossible, ungoswillen. If they're just getting started now, how long is it going to last? It's going to splendidly gut great. Optimists and pessimists, not to mention the realists, air their opinions with unflagging energy, and as in everything else, they're all certain that they have a monopoly on the truth. It annoys a certain lady that her spouse has such supreme faith in the British, and a certain husband attacks his wife because of her teasing and despairing remarks about his beloved nation. And so it goes from early in the morning to late at night. The funny part is that they never get tired of it. I've discovered a trick, and the effect is overwhelming, just like pricking someone with a pin and watching them jump. Here's how it works. I start talking about politics. All it takes is a single question, a word, or a sentence, and before you know it, the entire family is involved. As if the German Waitress News and the English BBC weren't enough, they've now added special air raid announcements in a world splendid. But the other side of the coin is that the British Air Force is operating around the clock, not unlike the German propaganda machine, which is cranking out lies 24 hours a day. So the radio is switched on every morning at 8, if not earlier, and is listened to every hour until 9, 10, or even 11 at night. This is the best evidence yet that the adults have infinite patience, but also that their brains have turned to mush. Some of them, I mean, since I wouldn't want to insult anyone. One broadcast, 2 at the most, should be enough to last the entire day, but no, these old nincompoops, never mind. I've already said it all. Music while you work. The Dutch broadcast from England, Frank Phillips or Queen Wilhelmina. They each get a turn and find a willing listener. If the adults aren't eating or sleeping, they're clustered around the radio talking about eating, sleeping, and politics. Whew! It's getting to be a bore. And it's all I can do to keep from turning into a dreary old crone myself, though with all the old folks around me, that might not be such a bad idea. Here's a shining example, speech made by our beloved Winston Churchill. 9 o'clock Sunday evening. The teapot under its cozy is on the table, and the guests enter the room. Dussel sits to the left of the radio, Mr. Van D in front of it, and Peter on the side. Mother is next to Miss Van D, and Miss Van D behind them. Margot and I are sitting in the last row, and Pym is at the table. I realize this isn't a very clear description of our seating arrangements, but it doesn't matter. The men smoke. Peter's eyes closed from the strain of listening. Mama's dressed in her long, dark negligee. Miss Van D is trembling because of the planes, which take no notice of the speech, but fly biffily on toward Essen. Father is slurping his tea, and Margot and I are united in a sisterly way by the sleepy Mooshie, who has taken possession of both our knees. Margot's hair is in curlers, and my nightgown is too small, too tight, and too short. It all looks so intimate, cozy, and peaceful, and for once it really is. Yet I wait the end of the speech with dread. They're impatient, straining at the leash to start another argument. Psst, psst. Like a cat luring a mouse from its hole, they goad each other into quarrels and dissent. Yours, Ian.